Good mythical afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Ayala with another video for you. This is 13.2, Protest, Resistance, and Violence, Condensed. So, our objectives. You will be able to explain the issues surrounding the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, and you will be able to explain the causes and the effects of the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. So, where we left off, we finished up by talking about the Compromise of 1850. And this was embedded in it. This was part of the reasons why the South was A-OK with California coming in as a free state. Well, the Fugitive Slave Act, first thing, stated that accused runaways could be arrested. So no matter where you were in the United States, if you were African American, if you were a freedman or a freedwoman, if your families never were a slave, you could be arrested for no reason. You could be chilling in your house, having some coffee with your family, and if you were accused of being a runaway slave, they could come in, grab you, and take you. And this was a major issue. This was against the Fourth Amendment because there was no warrant. They were searching and seizing people, and there was no right to a jury trial, Amendment 6. And this was a major, major issue. The South, of course, really liked this law. They're smiley facing this law. Because from their perspective, it protected their lost property. It's like if you would have lost your backpack or your cell phone, and someone else found it, by law, they have to give it back. Or attempt to. This was the same concept, except for people. Very different. The North really disliked this law, because it required them to actively support slavery. If you did not go out and actively say, hey, this person is a slave, and you didn't actually obey this law, and you try to help people, you could be thrown into prison. It disrupted daily life. There are stories of people who were just, like, in New York City trying to get a dress made, and the tailor just happened to be an African-American dude or an African-American female, and a slave catcher would come in, grab them, and you'd be standing there in like a dress or a half-done tuxedo going, really? What the heck? And that moral issue was a major concern. Do I obey the law and support slavery? Or do I oppose it and go to jail? That moral conundrum of just because it is legal, is it moral or ethical? That's really the concept and the issue that people were dealing with. Meanwhile, there was another territory that wanted to become a state in the United States. This was Nebraska. So Nebraska will be split into two different territories, Nebraska and Kansas. And they will allow the people who live there to choose slavery by popular sovereignty, aka by voting. And the Southerners in Congress really like this idea. Let people choose. Because if they don't want to be slavery inside of a state, then people will vote not to have it. And this was an idea and a compromise that sounded good on the outside. But putting it into practice was an issue. Because what happens is that we're taking this big old territory right here. And they're going to split it into two. Kansas and Nebraska. This whole area. This is going to be all Kansas and Nebraska. And they're going to split it into two. And in particular, Kansas is going to erupt into violence. And what's going to happen is we're going to get Bleeding Kansas, which we call like the prequel to the Civil War. This is 1854 to 1861. So what happens is you're going to have pro and anti-slavery forces from around the U.S. rushing into Kansas to vote. In particular, these border ruffians from Missouri. And these border ruffians came in, they dissuaded, with quotes in the air, people who were anti-slavery from voting. Like, threatened to burn down their house or shoot them. And they all voted for Kansas to become a slave state. So Kansas becomes a slave state. And because when they win, they actually burn down the anti-slavery capital at Lawrence. We call this the Sack of Lawrence in 1856. So the pro-slavery Africa is like, yay, we won. Let's burn down the anti-slavery capital. Then we get the Potawatomi Massacre, where this guy named John Brown shows up. And he is a radical abolitionist. He absolutely despises the idea of having slavery. He thinks it's unchristian. He thinks it's wrong. It is morally, it's ethically and economically incorrect. And he will use this massacre at the Potawatomi as revenge for the destruction of Lawrence. He would literally drag settlers outside of their cabin, these pro-slavery settlers, I should say, and just shoot them right in the head, the whole family. Let the slaves free, but killed the settlers themselves. And we call this a prequel to the Civil War because it really shows the amount of violence and anger that's going to spread around the United States in just little Kansas itself. And that's the end. And as always, don't forget to be awesome.